It's great to be joined today by attorney Mike Papantonio, co-host of Ring of Fire. Let's talk, Pap, first about the latest with this C8 Teflon DuPont case. And just sort of to refresh everybody's memory, when some people hear about this case, they say, oh, this is a case about Teflon-coated nonstick pans. Those may have their fair share of concerns, but this is actually about a chemical involved in the production of that Teflon surface.
Yeah, it's amazing to me the people that don't understand what C8 is. You hear about Flint, Michigan, and you hear about lead in the water, and that's bad, that's awful. But here you have C8 in drinking water all over the United States. In about 8 or 10 major urban areas, they're drinking C8, not understanding that the very people who manufacture C8 as early as the 80s and the 90s, it was clear to them that C8 causes cancer. And as a matter of fact, they even told their employees who were working around C8 that it'll cause cancer. But they didn't tell the people who were drinking it. What happens is it's two ways it enters the water: by way of air deposits, and also by the way of them simply dumping the C8 into waterways. The Ohio River is a great example. They dumped 1,700,000 pounds into the Ohio River over a period of time. It ended up in people's drinking water in 6 major drinking facilities up and down the Ohio River that supplied water for about 80,000 people who were drinking the stuff every day. Their children were drinking it, putting baby formula. But it doesn't seem to matter. I mean, it's a remarkable thing. It doesn't seem to matter to DuPont. And now, finally, the United States and the DOJ never had any courage to prosecute. They still won't. I mean, nothing's really changed under, under our latest DOJ. So in Europe, they are. In Europe, they're asking real tough questions. In Amsterdam, for example, you have the company being called in for hearings, and they're just really almost just a step away from serious prosecution, I predict.
So talk to us so far, financially, what has been awarded and how many individual potential plaintiffs are you now up to?
Well, I mean, so far we've only had 2 trials of 2 individuals, and the last one was tried. The jury came back with $5.6 million for a man who had testicular cancer about 20 years ago. And the case was so strong, it didn't bother them that the cancer had resolved, because, you know, there's a notion in this business, and that is that documents drive damages. In other words, once a jury sees that a real ugly, culpable company has done some horrible things, they're not really focused on damages as much as they are just some type of retribution, and that's what happened here. The first case was the same. Jury came back, a woman had 17 years ago, had a kidney cancer. Part of her kidney was removed, and they came back with about $1.6 million. And there's 4,000 of these cases. We're going to keep trying them. The interesting thing about these particular cases, we can try them for a very long time, because every time we win, we are actually awarded attorney's fees. The client, in other words, the client is awarded that, and so it makes it fairly easy to be able to try the cases for a whole host of different lawyers that can come in there, and with the facts that we have, they're going to win most times.
What this case reminds me of in some ways is what we've now learned about Exxon and how early they knew that their activities with fossil fuels were damaging to the environment. Your work on this case has turned up that as early as February of 1961, DuPont became aware that at least in rats, C8 exposure was linked to enlargement of the testes, kidneys, adrenal glands, etc. And there's this chain of very incriminating documents going all the way back to 61 here. The idea that DuPont just had no clue has really fallen by the wayside here. I mean, it's just not believable.
Yeah, and to me, that's why I keep coming back. To me, it's remarkable that Loretta Lynch or Eric Holder have done nothing about this case. I mean, they're all into what happened in Flint, and Flint was an awful thing. But here, the C8 C8 is so ubiquitous now that they're finding it in polar bear livers because it stays in the environment for 5 million years. It stays in the human body for 25 years. And so it's what we call biopersistent. It's not, each and every exposure you have to the product builds up in the body, and it runs a higher risk of causing neurological damage, birth defects, cancer. And the Department of Justice has done nothing at all to look into this thing like they're doing over in Europe, because DuPont has such strong politics in this country. And they're able to back, they backed Eric Holder down. And so I'm sure the same thing's happening with Loretta Lynch. I don't know how we ever hold them responsible, David. The problem is, you dress them up in an Armani suit, put a gold watch on them, have them driving around in a Bentley, and all of a sudden they don't look like thugs. They don't look like criminals, but they are criminals. They're criminals who are capable of killing, criminals who are capable of doing far more damage than anybody that typically ends up in prison.
You and I have talked about how on so many issues there are really important differences between Democrats and Republicans. But when we talk about the power that some of these corporations have to really avoid any significant scrutiny from both Republican and Democratic administrations, I mean, is this one of those areas where Republicans and Democrats alike are both part of the same problem?
Democrats have been as much help to DuPont as Republicans. I tried a case one time to show you how full the Democrats are behind it. We had a case, a horrible environmental case in West Virginia. The jury ultimately came back with $380 million against DuPont. But the Democratic establishment and Joe Manchin himself, the governor at the time, was doing everything they could to cause harm to the claimants, his own constituents, and to prop up DuPont at every turn. That is the new DuPont. That is the new centrist Democrat that unfortunately we see now running with Kane and Hillary. Not much is different. I mean, so these people that we see Democrats do better on social issues, David. They do well on things like gender issues and rights issues, but where it comes to things like Wall Street, where money affects politics hugely, the Democrats are absolutely no different than Republicans. And as a matter of fact, I have a book coming out in September that I talk about this very issue. It's a book called, it'll be released in September 20th, Law and Disorder. And I spend some time talking about the fact that we're kidding ourselves if we think there's much of a difference here.
Last thing I want to touch on, when you hear the reaction from DuPont to everything that's going on with C8, you will sometimes hear this talking point that, hey, we've phased out C8. We're now using, and it's amazing because the name is almost the same, we're now using C6 instead. C6 is already showing the same types of patterns in research that C8 was, isn't it?
Actually, they're showing worse patterns, David, because it has the biological uptake is quicker with a C6. And again, it's the EPA asleep at the wheel. Not really asleep at the wheel. They know exactly what they're letting DuPont do. But again, money talks with both Democrats and Republicans, and that's why DuPont has been able to kill so many people over the years with their product. And so you have people that died of cancer for decades, and they never saw the connection. They never understood that they were drinking this cancer-causing substance in the water, showering with it, swimming in it, eating fish out of the river where the pollutant is. And so family members die, and they have no idea that there's a connection here.
Before we let you go, tell us a little more about the book, which, as you mentioned, is coming out September 20th. It's currently available for pre-order on Amazon. What can you tell the audience about? There's sort of like a fictionalized David Pakman in the story, isn't there?
There is. You'll like your character in the story, David. It's the point I make about you and other people in social media. I use your name. Sometimes I dress the names up, but I use you to make the point that without people in social media, that do exactly what you do every day. These stories would never be told. Corporate media cannot tell the same story that David Pakman tells, because David Pakman, for example, is not reliant on advertisers to keep him alive, the big advertisers like Ford and Merck and Pfizer. So, so your role, the role you play in this process, is so critical to getting these stories out there, and that's one thing I do with. I hope you like. I hope you read it and you like the character.
I will absolutely read it, and we will have more information in the video description about how to pre-order the book, and we'll have Mike Papantonio back on to talk more extensively about it. We've been speaking with attorney Mike Papantonio, co-host of Ring of Fire. Great always to talk to you.
Thank you, David. I enjoy coming on your program.